Hey, this is Vu, and today I'm going to talk about carrying on CT side. I see a lot of people that do just fine on T side, but struggle when they switch to defending, and I think a major portion of that is varying your playstyle. On T side, you don't really get punished if you constantly have the same playstyle or you're just hyper aggressive, because usually you're going to different spots most of the rounds, and if you have an IGL, it further masks that, so your opponents never get a true read on you. However, on CT side, if you continually play the same exact playstyle, your opponents are going to get a read and they're going to be able to deal with you. So you need to be able to change from passive to aggressive, both in the middle of a specific round and between rounds as well. So if we're talking about between rounds, most people understand the concept that you shouldn't just be pushing every round, pushing through long doors, for example. People are just going to be posted up waiting for you. However, some people seem to think that the alternative is to simply play passive every round, and that's not really very good either. For example, here on long A, if you never end up going to the left side of the doors here or pushing through, your opponents can easily give up map control knowing you won't flank, and if they do come back to long, they don't have to waste time or utility clearing out these left side angles, and they can more easily be looking right at you as they come out of the area. What you need to be doing is you need to show some form of aggression at least a few times so your opponents waste time, waste resources, waste utility trying to take back that area when you're not actually there. A decent example is this idea that just by showing that you're capable of aggression, you are causing your opponents to constantly be worried about it, even if it goes wrong. An example would be pushing out long doors here. Of course, it's very risky to be pushing out long doors on any given round. However, even if it goes wrong when you do it, your opponents will then realize that you are capable of pushing long doors, and they might be more hesitant to be stacked up on the other side of the map without someone holding control, because you could be pushing through long doors flanking on any given round. I'm sure we've all played against teams where they've pushed long doors a couple of times early in the half, and then you always have someone posted on it. Now, when I talk about going from aggressive to passive mid-round, I'm talking about having a setup that you can fall back into instead of this idea that a lot of people have where you just go aggressive and you are aggressive the entire round. Here on Dust 2, it's a little bit more complicated because you're generally expected to have control of long A, and if you were to go for cat, you would have to retake long. But if you can imagine, taking long A control, and then you can have your Opper and your second A rifler come back around and aggress onto catwalk. You can imagine a situation where this happens. Now, what these players on cat can do is they can put pressure on catwalk and fall off. The reason you want to be putting pressure on catwalk is because, again, you want your opponents to be using time and utility to get control of this area instead of taking it for granted. If you never pressure catwalk, the T's are going to start taking it very early on into the round, and they're going to use almost no utility to do it, which makes your job very much harder to hold their execute, because it'll be a much stronger execute with extra time to set up and draw out your utility, as well as extra utility to use when the execute comes through. This concept is extremely important, and you're very rarely going to see pro teams that give up cat for an entire half for this reason. They're constantly moving around and making their opponents scared of potential aggressions, and ops going aggressive, for example, boosting up on cat, is one great way to do that, but aggressing on cat with a double rifle also works as well. Just the idea is that once you get the contact, catwalk is an area that is very hard to hold consistently and maintain control of. So instead of trying to hold on to it forever, you want to be able to fall back into the passive setup where maybe you have a rifler towards elevator and the Opper towards car. Obviously, Dust 2 is a little bit more complex of an example because of the fact that you have long and short. However, you can imagine bracket control on Inferno, where you can fight for that early and fall back into a passive setup, or you can imagine mid control on Mirage, where you fight for mid control, and then if you get an entry or an advantage late round, you usually end up into a much more passive setup as well. So don't just go aggressive and play aggressive the whole round. Be able to transition off of that into a passive setup where, again, your opponents are going to have to use utility and time trying to take control of the area that you were just at. The next most obvious concept is static holding angles, and this one is fairly basic, so I'll just gloss over it, but I see a lot of people that will just statically hold an angle with a rifle like this. Of course, this is an egregious example, but this gives the point well, in that when you're holding an angle that your opponents are expecting and they're going to peek out looking right at you, you're very likely to die. You actually have the disadvantage there. So you can't be statically holding an angle where you don't have some sort of an advantage. A decent example would be Pit here, where only your head is showing, so you have some sort of a one-up on your opponent. Or you can be playing off angles where your opponents hopefully aren't hard clearing you and getting the free kill. However, if you're playing an angle like this, you simply can't be standing still holding it. You'll die most of the time. You need to be playing a peek unpeek style, where you can be sitting here, wait, and then you peek out, and then unpeek, and then you wait, and then you peek out, and you unpeek. Now, I wouldn't actually recommend this on long corner here. A better example would be over towards catwalk, where you can be playing this angle here, wait, and then peek, and try and catch someone, because the goal is that they'll clear this angle and they'll move on to the next one, and by the time they move on to the next one, you can shoot them in the side. If you're statically holding a lot of disadvantageous angles, you're also going to have a very tough time on CT's side. The next thing to think about is more playstyle focused. However, it's very important, just the idea that you need to be having a uniform playstyle if you want to succeed. For example, if you play B site here on Dust 2, you probably play B site on the majority of maps because it's usually the solo bomb site. And the reason you probably want to be playing the solo bomb site throughout every single map is because there are things that a solo bomb site player will know regardless of the map in terms of simply playstyle. For example, a solo bomb site player is incredibly focused on staying alive over top of getting kills, because if you were to imagine a situation where a B site player is playing an angle like this, he can get even 2 kills sometimes, and that is not enough to mitigate the fact that he died instantly and there's no one else in the bomb site. As soon as the B site player dies, this T's can then focus on other angles. They can focus on posting up, they can get the free bomb plant, play the after plant, and the rotates from the CTs are incredibly far apart. They're not going to be there until the bomb is ticked down at least 10 or 15 seconds, and it's just an incredibly tough retake to have. However, if the CT plays a spot where he can get 1 kill and then survive, for example, playing an angle like this, grab a kill and then hide, he allows the rotates to start moving, which means they'll be there earlier into the bomb plant. He also allows the rotates to use utility to support a flash like that can blind the T's and he can peek out and go for more. It also forces the T's to get less pushed up in the bomb site. They have to play usually someone posted up on the angle waiting, and then by the time your rotate gets there, someone needs to be posted on that as well, and it gives a lot of space and pressure onto your opponents to get kills and to delay for time. On the opposite end of the spectrum here, if you're a big bomb site player, for example, you play A on the majority of maps, you're probably not thinking about that, and you might not have even realized that that was a goal of a solo bomb site player, because a big bomb site player very often is simply going for frags and trying to survive as long as possible, but primarily if you can get 2 kills as a single big bomb site player, you're probably doing pretty well, because it's usually easier to retake that bomb site, and you have more players playing there, which means, if 2 players get 2 kills each, there's only 1 left for the T's, you're probably winning that. It's not too complicated of a retake. This is not to say that switching up your positioning a bit from map to map is a cardinal sin. However, if you want to optimize your gameplay, certainly playing similar spots with similar roles on every single map is going to help you out. The final thing to talk about here is nade usage. The thing on T side is your bad nade usage can easily be masked. If you have a couple of players that use utility well on T side, it doesn't really matter if you wasted all of your nades in the first 10 seconds, because you can keep your gun out and your teammates can support you with that utility instead. However, on CT side, if you use all of your utility early on in the round and your opponent's hit to your bomb site, you're essentially just screwed. So you want to be making sure there's always reasoning behind using your utility. Obviously, you can use your utility early to try and get control of an area that is tough to contest, like long A here. However, what I see people do is in the middle of rounds, they get worried, they get scared, and they just throw down utility with very little reasoning behind it just because they feel like they should. Try to make sure that you always have an idea behind why you're using a piece of utility, and if you do, if there's a reasonable concept behind it, it's probably not a terrible piece of utility to use, but just realize that any utility you use early, even if it gets you some sort of control, is utility you do not have later in the round. An obvious example of this would be Banana on Inferno. You can get a kill, you can get plenty of damage done with your utility early, but if you don't save any utility late round and then your opponents execute on you, it's going to make your hold incredibly tough, and you might lose that round and think it's because you couldn't hold the execute. In reality, a major part of that was that you didn't have any utility for the execute to actually deal with it. So anyways, thanks for watching, and I hope this helped. Damn, that was a really nice video. I really enjoyed that. Did you really? Why don't you go check out the Patreon, patreon.com/VuCSGO. Content every week, twice a week, 3 times a week? No, only twice. Demo reviews? Those two.